Are you guys excited for preseason right around the corner? Well, I have a 53-man roster projection for you coming after this. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today we are going to be breaking down my 53-man roster projection for the LA Rams. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't already, but let's dive right into it. I think it's really important right off the rip to talk about these notable names. The physically unable to perform notable name is Travon Howard. There's a chance he might not even have to be added to the 53, so that gives us an additional number. You know, we can add another guy. We'll see what happens there. In addition to that, notable IR, Xavier Jones. Unfortunately, the running back coach who has familiarity with him, Rashad Samples, will not get that opportunity. It looks like Jones is on the IR. It's uncertain if he'll come off it or not. But it can't see him making the 53-man roster if he misses all of preseason, which it looks like it could happen. Notable suspension. Okay, this guy won't count against the roster. They can put him on the suspended list. He'll come back halfway through the year. That is Bobby Brown III, the fourth-round pick the Rams love so much. They didn't love, I have to imagine, they didn't love the PED suspension, but it does actually make things a little bit easier for the Rams come down to cut day. All right, so you can see the offensive guys there. We're going to start with the offense. Starting off with quarterback, I have them keeping 3. I could totally see them cutting one of them, but I think it's going to be Stafford and Wolford as your starter and backup. I'm not concerned with Stafford's elbow at all, so before you ask, no, not concerned. He wouldn't be throwing in practice if that was the case. But John Wolford is getting a lot of run as the 2, and to be honest with you, I think the Rams like John Wolford a lot more than most people would think. I think they still really like Bryce Perkins, and I think he offers an intriguing ability, obviously with that mobility, but the fact that, you know, he's finally somebody they can develop in the background. But John Wolford is who they trust to be the backup, and that is why he runs the scout team very well. They just really trust him at the end of the day, and that's why he's on the roster. I have them keeping all 3. I think Luis Perez is going to get an opportunity in preseason, obviously, but I think they signed him to be a camp arm that they're familiar with. They're not looking to give him really much of an opportunity to win the 3rd job. Maybe they'll push, you know, maybe it's to push Bryce Perkins, but I don't really see much of a competition there. I think Perkins is the better arm, so I think they'll keep Perkins, especially because of that mobility. So that is my quarterback list there. We keep 3. So starting with the running backs here. And, you know, it's always interesting because when you have all the talent the Rams have, Xavier Jones goes to the IR. It still opens up the door for guys like Trey Ragas, who they just got, you know, off of free agency. A guy by the name of AJ Rose, Raymond Calais, Jake Funk, of course, Kyren Williams, the 5th-round pick that the Rams traded up to acquire. He is now healthy. He is off the physically unable to perform list, and so for that reason, I think it's a no-brainer to put him on the roster. If he wasn't off the list, then he likely wouldn't make the 53, and they would just keep him on that list until he was ready and he was healthy. But he is going to make this roster, no doubt about it. We'll probably see him in preseason relatively soon. He was a go, all padded up today in practice, so that's something to keep in mind moving forward. Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, Sean McVay continues to talk about, as he doesn't have a 1 and a 2. These are both his starting running backs, and honestly, according to Jordan Rodriguez, it sounds that way. It doesn't seem like anybody's emerged as the guy. It seems like they've split up the carries a lot with those two, and really it's a matter of staying healthy. So I think that ultimately the Rams are just trying to keep those guys healthy. They'll keep them on a pitch count that I think will benefit them the most. So I have obviously AKERS, Hendo, and KYREN, but who is my 4th option? Because I do have a 4th running back making this roster, and while I like Raymond Calais' return ability, I like his ability to pass catch out of the backfield, and I like AJ Rose, and I like Trey Ragas, and of course I do like the unfortunate injured Xavier Jones. I have to give it to Jake Funk. He's a 7th-round pick that they invested an actual draft pick in. He played all of last year, at least on special teams. I'm not really a big fan of him as a runner. I don't think he's an NFL running back, but I think he's a very good special teamer that the coaches trust, and so for that reason, I think he'll make the roster because of his special teams contribution, which makes a lot of sense because if you're barely making the roster, you have to have some sort of special teams ability. Otherwise, they're not going to keep you. We move on to the wide receivers. This is an interesting one here. A lot of different things coming down the hatch. This is going to be the assumption, or with the assumption, that Jacob Harris is going to make the 53. The reason I'm saying that is because obviously most of you would assume that I would have him on the 53, but I mean that he's not going to be hurt when the time it comes. He did get banged up. He is going to be out 2 to 3 weeks, but I think he'll be back in time to actually have to make a decision whether or not he's on the roster, and I don't think there's any decision to make. You can't risk a 4th round pick last year, losing him, a guy that can play special teams the way he does, the athletic profile he has. You can't waste him. So obviously he's not going anywhere. I do have them keeping him. I have them obviously keeping Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson. I had him on the 53. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't have the Rams based on the fact that he might be ready for week 1. If he isn't ready for week 1, I have to imagine he'll be ready for week 2. There's no way the Rams are going to put him on the PUP list just for that, because he'd have to miss multiple games and he wouldn't be able to come back until I believe week 4. So yeah, that's not even an option for me. I'll put Van on the roster. I'll also put Tutu Atwell on the roster, 2nd round pick. He is showing out in training camp from all reports, so I definitely like that. And then Brandon Powell, who surprisingly is getting a lot of run as a wide receiver. Sean McVay is giving him an opportunity to earn his stripes essentially on the offensive side of the ball instead of just being a returner. That adds a level of trust, obviously, from Coach McVay. He just played in the Super Bowl. He's a guy that really, lit a spark under the Rams, with his return ability, but he also is adding another element, and he's adding more value. When you keep a guy like that to return kicks, and you have to cut a guy that's a really good receiver, it really does help to nullify just how hard that hits when that same guy that can return also, you find out, can receive. And I think this is somebody that will be utilized a little bit this year in the offense, and that's the hope. I brought it up last year hoping that would be the case. It looks like that's what the Rams are planning. They'll probably use him in some sort of rotational role with Atwell and Skoranek, who I also have making the roster. And so the way we have it, I have them keeping 7 wide receivers. Harris then might screw around a little bit and make him a tight end, so it makes it feel better on the roster sheet. I know people are probably confused, or maybe not, but Odell Beckham Jr. is not on this roster. He won't be on this roster. He will not be on the roster if the Rams sign him until November. So there's no need for the Rams to have to make a roster decision. That's why he doesn't show up on here. Unfortunately, with the Rams, I am cutting Landon Akers, Lance McCutcheon, Austin Trammell, and JJ Koski. I have a 17-man practice squad at the end that I will give you to kind of give you an idea of where I see these guys, but we'll cover that at the end. In addition to that, we have the tight ends. And normally teams around the league like to keep 4, even sometimes 5. I think the Rams are just going to keep 3 here. That means my buddy Jamal Pettigrew unfortunately will not make the 53, although I do have him on the practice squad. I think he's going to show out. He's a fantastic blocker, and I think he's going to make his presence felt in preseason, so that's a name to watch out for. Plus, he's wearing number 81, so it's not hard to notice him, obviously, on the field. But I have Tyler HIGBEE, Kendall Blanton, and of course Brycen Hopkins. I think they're no-brainers. They're locks. We already knew that. Brycen Hopkins really earned his stripes in the Super Bowl. They don't win that without him. His key catches and conversions, it was really big for him, so he's going to stick around. Roger Carter, Jamal Pettigrew, and Jared Pinkney are on the chopping block there, although I do think they'll try to bring back either both of Pettigrew, Carter, and Pinkney, one of those two of those 3, whatever, but I think they're going to bring back at least one of those guys, and I think Pettigrew is going to be the guy that shows out the most. Moving on to the offensive linemen here, and this is a little tough, but I honestly don't love the way the offensive line stacks out. I think it honestly is a little easier for me, might be a little tougher for others, but I have, of course, Noteboom, Edwards, Allen, and then, I have Bruss making the roster as the starting right guard. I have Havenstein, so that's your left to right offensive line going into the season projected. Those are the 5 I have. And then I have, obviously, A.J. Jackson. He was great last year in relief. And then you have A.J. Arcuri, the 7th-round pick out of Michigan State. I very much think he's going to be on this team. Then you have Coleman Shelton, who, reports are Coleman Shelton is really pushing for that right guard spot. So we'll see. But I definitely think it's a no-brainer that he makes the roster, as well as Tremaine Ankrum. There's no need to let go of him. He can play tackle, he can play center, he can play guard. So he has a lot of versatility there. And he's played in big games going back to his days at Clemson. And then finally, I have them keeping it at 9. I don't have them going over 9. I think that's it. I think they're going to cut Bobby Evans finally. I know he was a third-round pick in 2018. I know some people don't like that, cutting him and all that. I think that they're going to I think they're going to cut him. Adrian Ely, another guy that I think they're going to cut, as well as Chandler Brewer. Max Percher goes right on the practice squad because the international exchange program, essentially. Jeremiah Colon and Jack Snyder, who is a very interesting contender, I think, to make this roster as a UDFA. He's the only UDFA they added at that position on the offensive line, so he's definitely a name to look out for moving forward. All right, so that means it is on to the defense. And, you know, as we get into this, obviously there is a lot of different ways we can go. You know, the Rams have a Super Bowl roster, so if there are guys that I leave off, understand this. I still think a lot of these guys that I'm cutting are very talented. When you look at this roster, it's one of the best 90-man rosters in football, no doubt about it. So they're going to be cutting a lot of talent, but here we go, diving into it. We have the defensive line. Obviously, Aaron Donald, A'Shawn Robinson, Greg Gaines are your starters. Then we have Marquise Copeland making the roster, and Michael Hoyt to round out the defensive line. If you're not paying attention, that is 5. I only have them keeping 5 defensive linemen. They're going to have to play with the numbers a little bit here because they have a lot of talent. They have a surplus of talent in the back end of the secondary that they're going to have to figure out how to keep. And so with that said, I have them going there. I think the numbers game works out well, especially with Brown on the suspended list, and almost helps them. To a degree. I understand they probably wanted him to play. I would imagine they had, high hopes for him, and it's not like he's out of the woodwork. I mean, he'll be back, mid-season, but it does give them an opportunity to keep a guy in Hoyt that has comfortability, has played in big games. So has Copeland. He played in the preseason, and he moved up from his career, went from the preseason to playing in the playoffs, having an interception on Kyler Murray. So, I mean, this is somebody that has been developed, as well as Greg Gaines. So they feel really good about their defensive line. The only guy that is a big snub, in my opinion, is Jonah Williams. I also think Ernest Brown, the 4th, is probably looking at another practice squad stint. If they don't, have him plucked off theirs, we'll see if he'll make it. And then I think Elijah Garcia out of Rice, a friend of the Downtown Rams podcast, he is very intriguing. He's got a great skill set, and I think he's somebody that could not only make the practice squad, but I think he might actually be back on the 53 and get an opportunity later on the season if they have to call up anybody. That's a guy that has a lot of the tools that they look for to play the defensive line. Up next, we have the outside linebackers, and here is about as simple, straightforward as it gets. You keep 5. It's that simple. You don't need to go crazy. You have Leonard Floyd, you have Justin Hollins, Terrell Lewis, Chris Garrett, and Daniel Hardy. That's the 5. There's not much competition after that. You have Benton Whitley, a UDFA, Keir Thomas, a UDFA, and Braden Thomas. It doesn't mean that those guys can't be on the practice squad, but you're not going to run the risk of losing Hardy. He is way too athletic. He's got way too much potential to run the risk of losing in waivers. You're not going to get him back, quite honestly. So they like him. He's going to make the roster. I have those 5. We move on to inside linebacker, and because we're playing the numbers game here and trying to help out our back end of the secondary, we're going to go with 3 inside linebackers here, and it might be a little bit of a surprise, but of course, remember this. Travin Howard does not make this roster because he is going to be on the physically unable to perform list due to his groin issue. So because he had that issue off-site, he is going to be on the PUP list. And that gives the Rams the ability to, maybe go a little bit thin here, especially because they have a bunch of pseudo linebackers and they have star position roles where I think, they don't have to keep 4 or 5 linebackers like in the past, most teams would. So the Rams typically don't keep that many. I have them keeping 3 here. Obviously, you have your, obvious ones that you see above me, with Ernest Jones, and of course, leading the way is Bobby Wagner, huge addition there. And then you have Jake Hummel, the UDFA out of Iowa State. The Rams always keep UDFAs, and while at this point I don't really have them keeping anybody, I'm going to go with Jake Hummel. When they got him, I felt like he was a draftable prospect, more so around the 6th round. This is their first UDFA on the roster. I can't see them not keeping a UDFA. And while I think Christian Roseboom offers a bit in special teams and has played, I think Jake Hummel's ceiling is higher, and I think that's somebody that they got for a reason. They went out and they did not spend too much time on undrafted rookie free agency on the level of other teams. They went out and they got Jake Hummel, who I had a 6th-round grade on, so I think this makes a lot of sense with those three. That means Roseboom, Jake Gervais, and Anthony Hines III I have getting cut, unfortunately. And then we move on to the cornerback spot, which is probably the most fun spot. That, you know, and when it comes down to cut day, it's always fun when it comes to, you know, cornerbacks, because there's so much talent the Rams have, and it's not fun that these guys get cut, but it's fun to think about how much talent the Rams have, and you're hoping that they're going to keep your guy. So looking at this, obviously you have Jalen Ramsey, you have Troy Hill, DECOBIE Durant, Robert Rochelle. I have David Long making the roster, and DERION KENDRICK. I've changed it. Notice, remember I said DERION KENDRICK's off the field issues from the draft. I'm not saying that they're big. I'm not saying that they're really bad, but I'm saying that they were reported as off the field issues because of those red flags, because he didn't run a fast 40 time. I was thinking, you know what? The Rams might be able to sneak him on the practice squad because teams might have already just dropped him off their board. However, he is blowing up in camp. He and DECOBIE Durant are being talked about as guys that are going to have legit roles this season in the league on a Super Bowl team. When you think about that, there's no way in hell that you can justify cutting either of those guys. And obviously Durant's not somebody that would be cut, but a 6th-round pick, you could argue, would be in that conversation. However, I would be absolutely against it. I think they have to keep all 6. We already made the move with the defensive line. It allows you to do that. Obviously, I think they should increase the amount of spots on a 53-man roster. I think it should be at least like 55, maybe go up to 60, but that's not what we're here for. So since they have to do 53, we already helped the numbers game out with only keeping 3 inside linebackers, keeping 5 outside, and then you have only 5 on the defensive line, only 9 on the offensive line. We're not keeping 10, we're not keeping 11. You know, I understand you're going to take a hit keeping 7 wide receivers, but you can't afford to not keep all those guys. You have 3 tight ends. You're not keeping a bunch of tight ends. You are keeping a 3rd quarterback, which does make things complicated, but you're not keeping 5 running backs. So I think obviously you can't afford this based on my blueprint and how I put the roster together. You can afford this. You keep Kendrick. You have 6. Unfortunately, you have other guys that are very talented. I think, you know, you look at Grant Haley and the fact that he offers special teams ability, return ability, and on top of that can actually play and was on that Super Bowl roster. It's hard to justify guys like that and Tyler Hall not making the team, but that's the matter of the fact. It's those two. TJ Carter's shown some flashes in camp from what I've seen. Deron Lowe and Caesar Dancy Williams I have getting cut. Again, it's an unfortunate process, and the Rams are so loaded at corner. But, you know, these guys are going to get a lot of playing time because the Rams are so loaded at corner. They're going to get a lot of playing time in preseason because I think a lot of these guys are going to be on the bench. Sean McVay does not want to risk this depth. He does not want to risk these guys that he knows will make the roster. So I think you're going to see a lot of TJ Carter. You'll see a lot of guys like, you know, Tyler Hall and Grant Haley. He'll let them play for their jobs and potential jobs down the line. Doesn't mean they can't make the practice squad and get called up if anything comes up, but I don't really see them making the 53 because they drafted those 2 corners. We move on to safety here, and this one is a little weird at the moment because I don't really know where Quentin Lake is right now. Our buddy from Downtown Rams, he came on our show twice. Big fan of Quentin Lake, and I think he's somebody down the road could be very similar to a John Johnson, Jordan Fuller-esque type of guy and be a starter. However, he has been on the physically unable to perform list pretty much the whole offseason. So I don't know where we're at on that. It's been an undisclosed injury, so we don't really know what to expect. And that kind of made this a little difficult. So I have him making the team because I think he'll be back, but I don't know. So I have them keeping 5. It's him, Rapp, Burgess, Fuller, and Scott. I have Scott being the lead dog there. And cutting, unfortunately, Russ East, J-Ron McVay, and Daniel Isom. I think all 3 of them have a chance to make the practice squad. Russ East is probably the most likely to get claimed by another team, but I think Yeast will make the roster if Quentin Lake is still on the PUP list. I think they'll keep Yeast, and that'll be like kind of that opportunity to keep him. I always said when they drafted Yeast, I didn't think they had enough room to keep him on their 53, and I don't think, obviously the Rams have shown you in the past, they're not a team that'll just keep guys just because they put a draft pick next to them. obviously they released Sam Sloman, a kicker, mid-season. They have not been afraid to do that. And so I think, even the fullback back in the day, Sam Rogers, he didn't even make the roster. So there's a lot of things here. You can't just assume a guy gets drafted, he'll make the roster. But I do think Yeast has a chance with preseason to really push himself. And if Quentin Lake is not healthy, they'll opt to keep him on the PUP list and bring Yeast onto the regular season roster. With that said, there's only one position left. It's the special team role. You have 3 guys, actually you have 4 guys, and we just have to decide which one is getting cut. Well, it's not going to be Matt Orzech because he's the only long snapper. It's not going to be Matt Gay because he's one of the best kickers in football, and he's the only kicker. Or is he? He's not, actually, because Cameron Dicker plays kicker, and he also punts. And he's actually going up against Riley Dixon. Now, I have the Rams sticking with Dixon. I think Cameron Dicker could have a better camp. I think Cameron Dicker could blow up in preseason, and they're still picking Dixon. Because 1, they believe they can probably bring Dicker onto the practice squad if need be. And 2, Dixon is the veteran. This is a Super Bowl team. You don't want a rookie punter if you need, in big type of games against like a Tampa Bay or a Green Bay or the AFC West or the Bills or whatever. You don't want punting to be the detriment of your team. And while I don't see the Rams punting a ton, when they do have to punt, would you rather have the rookie UDFA or would you rather have the veteran? I mean, I'd rather have Johnny Hecker, but that's not really the question. So with that said, I have them keeping Riley Dixon. Hopefully he's going to work out. We'll see. I would not rule it out if Cameron Dicker eventually down the road, if Riley Dixon wasn't good enough, Cameron Dicker got a shot and got taken off the practice squad for the Rams and became the starter. But that's how I have it now. That's my 53. And to wrap this thing up, I have a 17-man practice squad projection here. Projected practice squad, I guess, makes more sense. So with the running backs, I have them keeping Trey Regis and AJ Rose, mainly because I think Raymond Calais is too big of a name, especially, cut down day. I think there's a team that would claim him. I think Tampa, a team that drafted him, would be interested. So unless, Calais gets hurt again, which is the only reason he's still on the roster is because he made, the offseason roster because he got hurt and they stashed him on IR. I don't think he'll make the roster. There's just too much there, unfortunately. So I have Regis and I have AJ Rose making the practice squad. I have Lance McCutcheon, a guy that, look, if there is an injury where, Van has to go on the PUP list or Sko goes down or Powell goes down, I will tell you right now, put it in the bank. Lance McCutcheon will make this team if there is another injury. They will keep him. I think he's showing out, from everything that I'm seeing. He's showing out in camp. He's doing a really nice job. He's flashed. And I think we're going to see that in preseason. So this is the preseason 53-man roster, and now obviously into the practice squad. So I think Lance McCutcheon's the big name there in the practice squad that could end up having a starting role down the line, at least in special teams, and then maybe working his way into the offense. Landon AKERS is another guy that I really like, and I think he's somebody that, another good preseason could even keep him out of the Rams practice squad. I think Koski's gone because I think they'll cut Koski, and I think teams know him too well. You have other teams around the league that have these Rams coaches. Don't rule out the Vikings being a team that is going to, scoop up these guys because Kevin O'Connell knows these guys from working with him. Do not forget that as Sean McVay's coaching tree continues to grow, there are more guys out there that have experienced, moments coaching these players that are now up for grabs. It's going to be hard. And if you let go of a guy like Perkins, well, O'Connell worked with him. If you let go of any of the defensive guys, well, Coach Evero worked with them, and he's in Denver. So you have to keep that in mind. There's a lot of familiarity here, and it's going to be harder to keep these guys as Sean McVay's coaching tree keeps expanding. Something to keep in mind. So I have I have Jamal Pettigrew, the cousin of Brandon Pettigrew. I have him making the practice squad. I think he offers a lot. I think he's a chance to be a late call up in the season. Later on in the season, if there's an injury, he'll be the next guy up. I have them keeping one tight end, and I have it being Pettigrew from his days with McNeese and, of course, LSU. I think he's shown you enough, and he's the best blocker of the three that they have, at the bottom of the depth chart. Jack Snyder makes the practice squad, UDFA. I like adding him. I think he's very close to making the 53. I have him just missing. Max Percher, the reason I said 17, even though the NFL only has a 16-man practice squad, is because with the 17, that is with Max Percher. So I was putting that in. I know it's 16, but they get an exemption there for Max Percher, so basically it's a 17. I have Elijah Garcia, as I mentioned, from Rice, the UDFA, making the practice squad. Jonah Williams, I have. I don't necessarily think it's realistic. I think he's somebody that would get claimed. He is a 53-man roster guy. Could be on the Broncos. I could see any of those type of teams picking him up. So I don't think it's very realistic. Just like Ernest Brown IV, it's going to be hard for him to get stashed on the practice squad again. We'll see. Christian Roseboom as well. Already spent some time with the Broncos. Spent some time with the Chiefs, I believe. So that'll be tough. Grant Haley will be tough. Tyler Hall will be tough. These guys played in the Super Bowl. So there's always stuff to keep in mind there. I also have TJ Carter, Russ Yeast, Daniel Isom, and Cameron Dicker. That is my practice squad, and that's what I have. Who do you have in your 53-man roster? I'm very curious. Let me know in the comment section below. What do you think about mine? Who did I leave out that you think is going to make it? Who did I leave out that made you pissed off, made you happy? Who did I add that might have surprised you? I don't think I have that many surprises, but let me know in the comment section below. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and if you like this, be sure to hit the red subscribe button and be sure to hit the thumbs up button. It goes a long way for the channel. That's going to do it for me. I hope you guys take care, and I'll see you guys soon. Later.